Welcome to my presentation on libraries in the ancient world. First, we'll start off with the Sumerians in Mesopotamia. Inscribed clay tablets that date before 3000 BC have been found among some of the Sumerians' remains during a dig recently, which also used to be known as Mesopotamia. Originally, these people would use papyrus plants as ways to make paper, but found that use of clay tablets were more durable. These tablets were often written in a language called cuneiform, which you can see to your right, which was simple shapes, wedges, or lines that could be combined to form different sounds or numbers. Even after the Sumerians were conquered, their language lived on in their conquerors, and their literature was treasured by the Babylonians and Assyrians. Usually, there were simple notes written on these clay tablets, such as bills, marriage contracts, receipts, loans, inventories, grocery lists, deliveries, just to name a few. Yet, in a later archaeological dig, findings from the third millennium found clay tablets depicting lists of gods, hymns, literature, and geographical names. Eba and Hattuas. Eba was a royal palace with over 2,000 clay tablets, including administrative tablets, agricultural land, breeding animals, and more. They happened to find over 28 bilingual lists in the Sumerian language that had been translated into Elblate. As collections grew larger, there was a point in which the Ebla people and empire had to look at a way of organizing materials into multi volume stories on tablet. This led to the creation of a catalog. Depicted in the Nippur tablets, a mere listing of titles in no particular order was a way to be able to keep track of what they had. Now, the Hattuas, many tablets of this empire included a colophon, which would be the equivalent of a title page in an essay that helped organize groups of tablets. Their cat their catalog system became more detailed, including the given number of tablets in a work, a title, a description of the content in the work, the names of authors, any missing tablets, and finally information about shelving. One example would be a single chapter. When the singer in the temple of the deity Inwari breaks the offering bread, he then recites as follows in Haddock, the end. Many of these titles had to do with religion, ceremonies, rituals, charms, and myths. Tiglath-Pileser. He was one of the Assyrians' greatest rulers and is credited as a founder of Hattuas Library, who reigned lasted 1115 to 1077 BC. In this temple of the library, during the excavation, there was over 1,000 different works in the collection. Only a few works that would have truly had during the time that his library was created. There was two subsections that contributed the most to the writings in this temple. Omens, the determination from stars and other heavenly bodies, from sacrificed animals, natural events, and ideas of what the future could look like for his people. The second would be standard handbooks, vocabulary lists of plants, trees, animals, gods, places, names, multiplication tables, and things like that. Now, Ashurbanipal. He was a ruler and the founder of the first systematic collected library. He was literate and he boasted not only that he achieved the highest level of scribal art, but among the kings, my frontrunners, none had learned such an art before. The most impressive title he had in his collection happened to be the Epic of Gilgamesh. How the collection was actually created in 648 BC, the successful war against his half brother, who was the ruler of Babylon, gave him free reign over affairs in the great cultural capital. He helped himself to tablets in the temples, and there was loaded them onto carts, brought them to Navia, put them on with the other holdings, and on top of that, made copies of each of the books as well on clay tablets. The He was very much worried about theft. Clay tablets of Ashurbanipal, king of the world, king of Assyria, who trusts the Ashur Nahil. Your lordship is without equal. Ashur, king of gods. Whoever removes the tablet writes his name in my place. May Ashur Nahil, angered and grim, cast him down, erase his name, his seed in the land. Now Ashurbanipal's library. It would seem that he was very troubled by what many libraries today have to worry about, the theft of holdings. And the king's answer to this was actually calling on the spirits of his time to have wrath on its culprits and anybody who was going to steal from him. The most memorable quote from this chapter would have to be the library was founded for the royal contemplation. It was, in other words, the kind of private collection he could exploit personally, since he had mastered what normally was limited to professional scribes the ability to handle the signs of writing. This is to read and write cuneiform. The Greeks. In the ninth century BC, there rose the age of the Greek history, in which the creation of dramas, history, philosophy were now celebrated in Greek culture. Since the Sumerian language had died off during the period, the Greeks had to form their own alphabet to communicate with each other. Their alphabet consisted of 24 signs in which they were able to create every single word in their own language. This led to the establishment of schools, which helped spread the word and knowledge of writing. Once this happened, the demand for books began to grow. The commercial book trade grew due to many scholars and community members in Greece wanting to build their own private collection, which would end up looking similar to a public library today. Continuing on with the Greeks, by 400 BC, the Greeks were well versed in many topics written in book forms, from cookbooks, handbooks, poems, dramas, politics, and more. Yet, what exactly did they consider an actual book? Their scratch paper was almost literally the discarded chunks of broken pottery in which they inscribed by scratching with sharp objects. The Greek word of these chunks were actually eskrata, which was also known as the institution devised by the Athenians, whereby citizens would be voted out and whom in their midst they most wanted to be get rid of would actually be exiled. Similar to the show Survivor that we see today. Yet items like this would need to be on a more official documentation, such as a wax tablet. These were small frame panels of wood that one side was coated with wax. The writing was easily incised in the wax with a stylus and could be easily erased by rubbing it off if there was a mistake. For a book, the preferred material was a form of paper made from the stalks of papyrus plants. Now, the Greeks in the first public library. During 400 BC, the art of bookselling became fairly popular, even selling overseas. The creation by Aristotle of the large personal library, he was the first one to have put together a collection of books and to have taught the kings in Egypt how to arrange a library. Its size and range were such as it to require a system of organization the then on that was in place proved to be suitable enough infinitely larger collection amassed in Alexandria, Egypt, they were able to follow the exact same system. And a unique decree actually passed by the Athenian government that bears the key function of the sort of library that the Ptolemies aim to attain, namely to serve a repository of trustworthy copies. Even today, when books are mechanically reproduced, versions turn up that so not accurately reproduce the originals. The most memorable quote from this chapter I found was the orchestra was part of Agora, Athenians' main square, and the site where goods of all sorts were sold. Booksellers obviously were well established by Socrates in the day, and they had staked out their own special area. Some questions I had based off of what I read. Question one: which generation do you believe had the most influence on libraries as they are today? Question two: how did Aristotle's impact in the creation of public library as we know it? Question three: how do you know the Sumerians' cuneiform had helped with the language creation today? And question four: how did the creation of a school impact the use of libraries in its time of the Greek? And how did that connection stay the same today? Thank you so much for listening to my presentation.